Hello, September 2nd? No. It's September the 1st. I don't know why I said 2nd all of a sudden. Oh, because we're going to be in Ruth chapter 2. I had 2 on my brain. So that's what we're doing tonight. It's the 1st of September. Welcome to September. I've got some maple trees over here, and there's like a whole bunch of red leaves on them already. I guess fall has started according to the trees at my maple trees in my front yard. Barely, but there's hope. I'm not a guy who likes summer, especially with the way summers have been going around here lately. Don't so much have summer as we have fire season, smoke season. So I'll be happy to get some rain and have my trees change color and do some burn piles. It'll be good times. Anyway, I wanted to say sorry for the interruptions that we had last Sunday, as well as, that's funny, I meant to say last Wednesday, but also on Sunday. We had interruptions with the live feed. Sunday was bad. It was my phone doing the live feed, which is different than normal on Sunday, and I could see it cutting in and out the whole time. I don't think anybody watched it live, at least. But last week we had at least one live feed breakdown during the middle of our midweek study. I don't know what happened there. I'm on Wi-Fi here in my house and just stopped working. But I also got pretty distracted by like 20 or 30 fire trucks going down Highway 20. So I'm easily distracted. I apologize. I guess, that's one of the dangers of doing a live feed outside. There's too much to distract me. Anyway, that's last week. This week is right now, so let's pray. Father, I want to thank you for Simple Truth Church and that we get to study your word tonight. I thank you specifically that we get to do this midweek study. I'm grateful. I've learned a lot from you during these times. So, Lord, I ask that as we study your word, that we would draw closer to you, that we would hear and understand what you have to say to us tonight, and that we would apply it to our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so here we are. It's going to be Ruth chapter 2. Last week, we began the book of Ruth, chapter 1. And the focus of chapter 1 was on Naomi. Naomi and her small family went to Moab to escape the famine that was in Israel. And, they were there 10 years or so, it says. And during that time, her husband died. Her two sons married, and then they also died. And so she returned home to Israel after 10 years, and the only person that came with her was her daughter-in-law, Ruth. And Ruth went to Israel with Naomi because she loved her. She left behind everything in her, home nation, her family, people she knew, because she loved Naomi. And I think that a big part of that was she saw that Naomi needed help. So Ruth went with Naomi, and Naomi was kind of bitter. Anyway, not about Ruth, but just the general, direction that her life had taken. It'd be hard to handle the death of your husband and 2 of your sons, both of your sons, in such a short time. And so she blamed God. It even says so as she talks to her friends back home when she is reunited. This is verse 20 of chapter 1. She said to them, "Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara," which means bitter, "for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me?" So as we get into chapter 2 of Ruth, the focus switches to Ruth herself, but we're also going to see Naomi's opinion of her life begin to change. So here we go. Verse 1, Ruth chapter 2. Now, Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. So, quick pause here, because Boaz, you guys know the story. He's going to play a major role in the whole rest of the book of Ruth, and we get to meet him now. And verse 1 tells us two things about Boaz. First is it says that he was a worthy man. Now, worthy is kind of a funny word in the context of the rest of Ruth, because I get the impression that Ruth is an older guy, just from the way that he handles himself. There's some verses in chapter 3 that hint that he is an older guy, but he's still worthy, and worthy means manly or vigorous. So he was an older guy, but he was still manly. He was still a masculine guy. I mean, he was probably past his prime, but he's not some decrepit old guy on his last legs. The other thing that we learn about Boaz was that he was a relative of Elimelech, who was Naomi's husband. So we're not going to spoil the story anymore, but we'll learn why that is significant very quickly here. Verse 2. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go into the field and glean among the ears of grain after him in whose sight I shall find favor." And she said to her, "Go, my daughter." So she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come upon the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered, "The Lord bless you." Then Boaz said to his young man who was in charge of the reapers, "Whose young woman is this?" And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, "She is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, 'Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers.' So she came and has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest." So Ruth hits the ground running when they get to Israel. As soon as she arrives, she goes off gleaning. Now, we know from the end of chapter 1 that Ruth and Naomi arrived in Israel right around the time of the barley harvest. And I think that it's a pretty good bet that they did that on purpose, intentionally. That's the word I was looking for. They knew that the barley harvest was about to begin. Naomi knew of this practice of gleaning, and so they thought, this is a good time for us to go back to Israel if we're going to go. So last week we talked about the practice of levirate marriage. This week we're going to learn about the practice of gleaning. In the book of Leviticus, among others, but in the book of Leviticus, chapter 19, it talks about gleaning. Verses 9 and 10. It says, "When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge, neither shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest. And you shall not strip your vineyard bare, neither shall you gather the fallen grapes of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner. I am the Lord your God." The word glean means to collect. And the basic idea behind the law of gleaning was that it was a program of social welfare. And it was so important to God that he put it into the law, not just here in Leviticus, but several times throughout the law. He wanted Israel to have social welfare. And the passage that we just read in Leviticus is actually just the beginning of the passage that ends with the command, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." So this practice of gleaning, to allow gleaning to happen on your land, was a practical way to show love to your neighbor, and specifically to the poor. I think in other passages it talks about for widows and for sojourners, pilgrims, strangers in the land, people who were not Israelites, who lived within the borders of Israel. Gleaning took a lot of different forms, and at its heart, it basically meant that people were allowed to enter into any field or orchard or vineyard in Israel and collect anything that the harvesters had left behind. And to make this actually profitable venture or something that would actually work. Maybe not profitable, but the harvesters, when they went out to harvest whatever is growing, they didn't pick everything. It said don't reap your fields all the way up to the edge, leave the edges. I think other places it talks about the corners, to leave the corners. When you went along in your vineyard, you didn't pick every single grape, but you left some. And at the same time, anything that your harvesters dropped as they were working, it was supposed to stay on the ground. You weren't allowed to pick it up after it hit the ground. And the point of that was so that gleaners could come along and they would find something that they could take. Other times, besides the harvest time, people could pass into any field, whether it was along their way or they just wanted to walk into their neighbor's field. They were allowed to do that, and you could eat whatever you could pick by hand. Jesus and the disciples actually did this in the book of Matthew, if you remember, and they had some criticisms from the Pharisees, not because of that they were eating somebody else's grapes or grain or whatever it was, but because they were doing it on the Sabbath, and that was considered work. But it talks about this in Deuteronomy chapter 23, starting at verse 24. It says, "If you go into your neighbor's vineyard, you may eat your fill of grapes, as many as you wish, but you shall not put any in your bag. If you go into your neighbor's standing grain, you may pluck the ears with your hand, but you shall not put a sickle into your neighbor's standing grain." So, as a welfare system, I think this is actually pretty awesome. If you were willing to work, you would not go hungry. You could always go out and feed yourself. But it took work. Nobody just got checks in the mail for sitting at home. And, of course, it says God made it clear that this is for the poor and for the stranger in the land. Nobody's going to make money doing this, but as long as anybody was willing to work for themselves, they could eat. I actually knew a couple of guys who backpacked around Israel for a couple weeks back in the 90s, and they did this. I don't know if it's still like a practice to allow strangers to come into your vineyard or your orchard or whatever and eat whatever they can pluck, but that's what they did. Maybe they just didn't get caught. I don't know. But I thought that was neat that it was something that some guys that I know at least got away with. Maybe it's still practiced. I don't know. But anyway, for our purposes, that's gleaning. So Ruth went out to glean as soon as they arrived so that she could provide for herself and also for Naomi. We kind of learn a lot about Ruth in these short verses. We don't know too much yet from chapter 1, except for that she was loving to Naomi and sacrificed a lot of her life for the sake of Naomi. But here we learn a couple things. First, she was a hard worker. It says that she got up very early. The reapers said that she started very early in the morning reaping or gleaning. She didn't take breaks. She just worked and worked and worked. And she was respectful. As she was going along, she came into the field of Boaz, and it doesn't say it in the narrative, but later on when Boaz is asking about, hey, who's this lady? The foreman, the young man who was in charge, said, hey, this lady came and she actually asked, can I reap here? Can I glean here? Is that okay with you? And she's a hard worker. That was what the things that he noticed. And these things are very commendable, that shows good character about Ruth. But there's also another thing that maybe is not quite as obvious, is that this took a lot of bravery on Ruth's part. I kind of think that one of the reasons she thought I should ask permission is because there was probably people who didn't allow you to glean, especially if a Moabite woman wandered into your field. It's pretty likely somebody's going to say, hey, get out of here, you foreigner. We don't allow that around here. It was in the time of the judges, and we know from the book of Judges that everyone did whatever they thought was right. Some people followed the law, other people didn't, and it was based purely on their preference. So this also speaks to Boaz's character, because he does allow gleaning, and he did that even when there was nobody around to enforce God's law. So Ruth is out here. She's facing danger as a lone woman going off to glean, especially as an immigrant. Several times in this chapter, people warn Ruth about the danger that she's in. And again, it also speaks to Boaz's good character, that he has the kind of farm that doesn't allow people to, that where Ruth would be safe. I'll say that gently. So anyway, Boaz comes out to see how the harvest is going. He asks his foreman about Ruth. Who is that lady? And it is obvious that her hard work and her respect that she showed to the foreman made an impression on him. So we discover that she also kind of has this reputation. She's the young Moabite woman who came out with Naomi. They know this about her. And as she is observed, she adds to her good reputation of someone who's a hard worker, someone who respects the laws. So Boaz originally noticed Ruth because she's a stranger out in his field. But after he hears of the respect that he showed and the hard work, he takes more of a personal interest in Ruth, especially as it turns out that she's kind of distantly related to his brother. Well, it doesn't actually say how he was related to Elimelech, but it was somewhat distantly. Verse 8, Then Boaz said to Ruth, Now listen, my daughter, do not go to the glean in another field, or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping, and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? So there's one point that is different about Boaz's farm than others. There might be dangerous young men in the other fields. And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn. Then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? But Boaz answered her, All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land, and came to the people that you did not know. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Then she said, I have found favor in your eyes, my lord, for you have comforted me and spoke kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants. So Boaz comes to Ruth, and he personally reassures her that she's welcome to glean in his fields, and that she's going to be safe among his workers. It's a little bit sad, actually, when you think about it, that this is something that he has to say. Everything that Boaz promises her, especially in the beginning there, is stuff that should be universal. It shouldn't have to be stated. No one's going to attack you here. You're allowed to glean because that's what God's law says. That should be everyone should be saying that to Ruth or to any stranger in the land. It's God's law. I mean, he's basically saying, hey, look, you can pick up anything that falls on the ground here. It's all yours. We won't attack you. You can drink water, all you can drink. That's like the bare minimum of human hospitality, especially concerning, something just bit me, ow. God's people, they have this law about gleaning. It shouldn't be an exception that she's allowed to glean here. And yet to Ruth, it's kind of way above and beyond anything she hoped. She falls on the ground and expresses her thanks, and she talks over and over again about how, he spoke kindly to me. So, in the first few verses, like 2 or 3, when she says, I'm going to go out and glean today, you can almost tell that she's nervous about what she's going to go do. She says, I'm going to go glean and wherever I find favor. Hopefully nobody chases me away. So she's a little overwhelmed when Boaz comes out, the landowner himself coming to talk to her, not from the same caste at all, right? She's a destitute widow from another land, and he is a wealthy landowner. But he comes over her and personally welcomes her and offers her these reassurances. One thing that I notice about Boaz, and I never really took notice of this before the times that I've read Ruth, was that Boaz never speaks down to Ruth because she's a foreigner. it's almost like he doesn't notice, or he doesn't care at all that she's from Moab. The only time that it ever comes out of his mouth that she is from Moab is in chapter 4, and it's only as like a way of identifying her. He says, hey, by the way, there's this lady Ruth from Moab, Ruth the Moabite. He doesn't care that she's not from Israel. He's not going to treat her differently because she's a foreigner. He's going to treat her as he would treat anybody. He's just a kind guy. And I think that Boaz is kind of uniquely in a position to treat her with respect as a foreigner. How do I say that? She wouldn't necessarily get that much respect from most people as a foreigner. And yet Boaz is different, and I think that's because of who he is. Because Boaz's mom is Rahab from the book of Joshua. She was the Canaanite woman who hosted Joshua's spies as they came over to spy out the land. Was it Jericho? I think it was Jericho. And Rahab, believed the reports that she heard about God and wanted to be one of God's people. And so she's a foreigner. She's a Canaanite woman, but she was accepted into God's people, and her son is Boaz. So Boaz isn't bothered that Ruth is some foreign devil. She's a good woman. She's emigrated to care for a widowed old woman, and she's taken refuge in the shadow of God's wings, as he says. So, verse 14. And at mealtime, Boaz said to her, come here and eat some bread and dip your morsel in the wine. So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed to her roasted grain, and she ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. When she rose to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her, and also pull out some of the bundles for her, and leave it for her to glean. Do not rebuke her. So she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. Now, I don't think that Boaz has any kind of romantic intentions towards Ruth at this point. He just sees a woman in need. He recognizes that she is doing her best to care for her widowed mother-in-law. He sees that he can help. He's related. And so he goes above and beyond what is required of him. Not to win her over, but just because he thinks it's the right thing to do. He understands the poverty that she's facing. And so he makes sure that she gets enough, not just in inviting her to come and eat. You know, he provided her with a meal at that point and made sure that she had leftovers to take home. But he does everything that he can to ensure that she continues to glean in his field, because he knows that that's where she's going to be safe. And so he makes sure that she's getting plenty and, you know, reassures her again that you're going to be safe in my fields. Don't wander off to somebody else's. It might be dangerous over there. And so he instructs his reapers, hey, let her get the good stuff. Don't chase her away from the areas where you're working. In fact, make sure that you conveniently, accidentally drop some of bundles of grain so that she will have plenty to take home. Now, the interesting thing about all this is that the instructions that Boaz gives to his reapers don't make her work easier, but they make it more profitable. She still has to work for everything that she's getting, but the work that she does is going to accomplish more because they're providing her with a more rich supply, if that makes sense. She still has to bend down and pick everything up. It's all on the ground. So, you know, they're making her, they're giving her this the grain, but they're not handing it to her directly. She still has to come along and work for it. So she works for it. She works hard. It says she worked until evening, and then she came along and beat all the grain off of the stalks, because, you know, they cut off the stalk at the bottom, and all the grain is attached at the head. And so if you were a landowner like Boaz, you would kind of gather all of that grain, or all of that the stalks and everything all at once, and then you winnow it, so that's how you get the grain off of the stalk. But because she's just doing a small scale gleaning operation, she takes it and beats it off the end of the head, and she ends up with about an ephah, which according to my Bible is 22 liters roughly of grain, which is a lot. I'm thinking about that would be a heavy bag of grain to carry home, and not bad for a day of work. It's nothing like what the harvesters got on that same amount of time, but it's pretty great for a widow who has no other way to support herself and her mother-in-law at the same time. So in doing this, Boaz is ensuring that she's going to stay with his reapers, that she's going to be safe, and that she's going to be able to provide for herself and her mother-in-law. He's not just handing her money. He's not just handing her processed grain. He's making her still do the work, but as long as she's willing to work, she's going to continue to do well. Verse 18. And when she took it up and went into the city, her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. She also brought out and gave her what food she had left over after being satisfied. And her mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you glean today? And where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said, "The man's name with whom I worked today is Boaz." And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." Naomi also said to her, the man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers. And Ruth the Moabite said, Besides, he said to me, "You shall keep close by my young men until they have finished all my harvest." And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It is good, my daughter, that you go out with his young women, lest in another field you will be assaulted." So she kept close to the young women of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and wheat harvests, and she lived with her mother-in-law. So when Ruth comes home, Naomi sees she had a good day. She not only had a good showing for her labor of all the grain that she brought back, but she also was able to bring back something for them to eat. And she immediately recognizes the hand of God in what's gone on. Several times she blesses Moab in the Lord, and she talks about how God's kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead. Like I said, I don't think that Boaz at this point, or maybe even until Ruth brings it up, I don't think he has any kind of romantic intentions towards Ruth, but Naomi does. Naomi thinks about this. She says he is one of our redeemers, and so he was one of the guys. We talked about redeemers last week, but he was one of the guys who had a legal right to buy up the inheritance of Elimelech, since he had no heirs. A woman was not allowed to inherit property like that. But Boaz was one of the men who had the right to buy up that inheritance and also take on the mantle of responsibility for Elimelech's family. So Ruth's further news of Boaz's invitation to continue to glean in those fields gives Naomi even more hope. And you can almost feel the relief in her words. You can almost see that her hope is building, not necessarily of this future marriage between Ruth and Boaz, but just that God was being good to them, and she was recognizing it finally. Her bitterness is gone. I mean, maybe not gone, but it's not the first thing that you see about her. It's not the first thing out of her mouth anymore, because she sees the goodness of God again, and she sees the sovereign provision of what God is doing for her and Ruth. I mean, imagine the providence of God, that Ruth would go out, a foreigner. She doesn't know where she's going. She doesn't know what fields are what. She just goes out and she finds the field not only of a good man who's not going to abuse her, not going to chase her away, but one who is also a redeemer for her and her mother-in-law. And it's obvious that God worked to bring this about, right? But the thing is that God has been working since long before this. He was working when Naomi was back telling her friends, "Hey, don't call me Naomi anymore. Call me Mara. Call me bitterness, because of how bitter I am about what God has done to me." God was already working. God was already doing good things for them. He was already planning to bring this about. The only difference was Naomi's perception of God's goodness. And, we can let our personal miseries block out our view of God's goodness. It's always there, but we can let it kind of get in front of our eyes. Or, you can hold up your hand and block out the sun. You're not doing anything to the sun. The sun is still there. You're just preventing yourself from seeing it. So that's kind of what Naomi had done. She had focused on her bitterness. She was focused on the things that she lost. She didn't recognize the goodness that God had shown her already in Ruth, and that he was going to continue to show her in the person of Boaz. So that is Ruth chapter 2. Chapter 3. Next week, I had said that I would be in a different location this week, at least on Sunday morning. I mentioned that. Turns out that I had my dates wrong, so I frequently make that mistake. Next week, we'll be in a different location. I don't know where that'll be. Well, I do know where that'll be, but I'm not telling you. God bless you guys. I will see you. I'll see you Sunday, then I'll see you again next Wednesday. God bless you. Oh, let's pray. Jesus, I just want to thank you for the example of Ruth and Boaz, the good character that they had, the way that you shine your goodness down on the people in this story through each other, through the kindness of your people. Lord, we recognize that that's actually you working. That's you using your people as your body to do your good works on this earth. So, Lord, I pray that you would help us to be that for the people around us, that we would submit ourselves to you, that we would be your hands and your feet, doing your work here on earth and shining your glory around to the people around us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. Now I'm saying good night. Good night.